Hi there, so glad you're here. Hope you're having a good day. This is Jennifer McGuire, and today I'm sharing with you lots of tips and hacks for masking. Better yet, I'm making several cards, so you'll see the process that I go through to batch create cards, but not skip out on a lot of the details. I really wanted to make sure each of these cards had a lot to offer, so you'll see how I'm able to kind of manage that in an afternoon crafting session. Also, I will talk about ways you can simplify the process if you're looking to spend less time but still get great results. And I'll be honest, I was having a really bad morning and I started creating these and it brought me so much joy. And I hope it brings you joy too. Now, I will be using the new Tim Holtz Stamp Timber collab. This is made exclusively for Simon Says Stamp, and once it's sold out, it's gone for good. There is this large stamp set with over 30 images and the coordinating dies to cut out those images. Then there is also a die set available that you can see over on the right, which includes 2 different size postage dies. Now, I'm not using the coordinating dies today, but I am using the postage dies because if you've watched my videos, you know I love postage style stamps and cards. So this is right up my alley. Now for the first step, I'm taking all of these images off, keeping them connected, and putting them in my MISTI stamping tool. Now I could have popped each of these out, but this is going to save me time. I will pop them out later. Next, I have Masking Magic from Gina K Designs, by far the best masking paper there is. I'm taking 2 sheets of the Masking Magic and putting them together so it's extra durable. I don't think I needed to do this, but I just wanted to be sure. 1 layer of Masking Magic really is durable, ink doesn't bleed through it, but I plan to make 10 cards today and do a lot on this masking paper. And then I want to make more later on. So by doubling it up, I can be certain that it'll last me throughout all of my cards. So I've placed that doubled up Masking Magic into my stamping tool, and I'm stamping all of those images on the top with black ink. Doesn't matter how this is stamped, it doesn't have to be perfect. Next, I have my Tim Holtz recoil scissors. These are by far my favorite scissors for fussy cutting. Yes, I am fussy cutting, but you can see these images are pretty easy to fussy cut. You could use the coordinating dies to cut them out, but for the technique I'm doing, I chose to fussy cut so that I could cut right up to the image line. And in fact, I try to cut right down the center of the image line, and that way I get great inking over it. Now for some of these harder images like the skate that has this blade on the bottom, I just cut that blade off. So I just really have the shoe part of the skate. Then later on, after I've inked over it, I can use a white gel pen to color in the blade or use like an acrylic marker to add color over my inking. So I try to avoid those tricky parts and just keep the image cut out pretty basic. So you can see all of my images here. It didn't take me too long to cut these out. Now the snowflake, I didn't even bother cutting that out. I'm not going to use that image today. So now I have all of these masks that I can use to create many cards. So it took me a bit of time to do that fussy cutting, but it's going to result in a lot of cards. And again, you could just use the coordinating die to create your mask if you prefer to save that time. Now that our masks are ready, let's do our stamping. I started by taking all of the images out of that cling outline piece. I can't believe how many sentiments and images are in here. I'm not using the sentiments today, but I definitely will in the future. Now I went through and I chose the 9 images that I wanted to include on my cards. I could do more, but I'm sticking with these 9 to start out. I'll use others later on. I placed them in my MISTI stamping tool with some extra space around them. We need extra space so we can die cut them with the postage dies later. I have a big piece of white cardstock and I use my anti-static powder tool, and I'm stamping or inking up the stamps with Altenew Obsidian Black Pigment ink. This is a pigment ink so that I can add clear embossing powder and heat set it. Now, you could just stamp this in black. You do not need to heat emboss. That would be a great way to save time here. But I really wanted that shiny outline look, so I decided to do the heat embossing. So I will continue to do this with multiple panels, stamp it, add the clear powder, and heat set it. The nice thing is once you get going, your gun will be hot, so it takes less and less time each time to heat set them. So it really won't take long to do that. But the first way you could have saved time here is to just stamp those with plain black ink. Okay, so I did many sheets of this, and I'm holding two sheets together and then cutting apart all of these images. You could keep them connected, but it's much easier to die cut the postage die around them if they're cut apart. And since I'm holding two sheets together, it'll save me a bit of time in cutting all of these up. Remember, all the images are stamped in the same place because I use the MISTI stamping tool, so that will save me time by holding two sheets together while I cut them. And I'll do the same with all of the sheets. All right, now that I have all of these images ready, it's time to use those postage dies to cut them out. I think these postage dies are great and they fit these images perfectly. I'm making sure to do some with the bigger postage die and some with the smaller postage die. I'm using my Empress die cut machine along with the small cutting plates. That'll save me some time because I can die cut two at once, and these small plates take less time to run through the machine, so I can quickly die cut all of these. By the way, today's technique works really well with any small images you may have, and you could just use circles or squares to cut them. It doesn't have to be the postage die. Okay, so I continued to die cut all of those images, and now I have all these postage images ready to go. It's time to add color to them. I'm taking two to start with, and I have my Ultra Sticky Mat from Altenew. Any kind of sticky mat is really helpful for this next step. I'm putting the reindeer mask over Rudolph's face, and I'm putting the candy cane mask over the candy cane image. So those are the masks we created earlier. Next, I'm using my Altenew alignment guides. These are these L-shaped pieces that I can use to mask off the center of the postage so that the little decorative edge doesn't get inked. I'm inking over this with my Tim Holtz mini ink blending tool and distress inks. For this particular one, I used Twisted Citron, and I ended up going to Mowed Lawn. So I did Twisted Citron, the lighter color, over the whole image, and then a little bit of the darker Mowed Lawn around the outside edge only. Now let me tell you more about what I'm doing here. So those alignment guides, you can see they look like two L's. I am lining those up so that I'm masking that outside edge of the postage die, so these look like actual postage. Now, I find these very helpful, but if you don't have these alignment guides, you could create your own from cardstock or masking tape or masking paper. You can just see how the sticky mat grabs a hold of those alignment guides and holds them in place while I ink, so I find them very handy to do. But again, you could cut your own L shape using scrap cardstock, scrap acetate, anything you want. So once I've inked over it, I remove the mask and I move it on to the next postage. So you can see I put the little candy cane mask over my candy cane image, move those alignment guide L shapes, add Twisted Citron over the whole thing, and then the darker Mowed Lawn only on the outside edge. And you kind of get in a rhythm doing all of these, and so it doesn't take as long. So I use two colors so that there is like this uneven look in the background. If you wanted to save time, you could do one color. I'm also using Tim Holtz foam inking tools because those are a really fast way to just press ink over the mask, and you don't have to take any time to blend. I didn't want this to end up being a solid background. I wanted a little bit of a variation to it. So this is a really forgiving way to add that ink color. Now, I chose to use distress inks because they're beautiful, and honestly, I just ink swatched them all, so I've kind of fallen in love with the colors again, but you could use whatever inks you wanted. After doing a bunch of green postage, I've moved on to pool colors, so I'll end up having 4 postage stamps on each card, one in reds, one in pools, one in greens, and one in blues. So we've done the green, and here we have the pools. Next, let's move to the reds. For the reds, I used abandoned coral first, and then I added lumberjack plaid around it. I think abandoned coral is a lovely light red color and great for the holidays. So you can see this is quick ink application. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it because we're going to actually do more to the background later on, which you could skip if you wanted to. Then for the blues, I did Salty Ocean with prize ribbon. Here you can see how uneven I'm intentionally making this. Not only does that save me time because I don't have to blend, but it gives really cool results. Okay, so after I have done the inked background for all of my postage stamps, I'm doing an extra step that you definitely could skip if you wanted to, but I think it's so much fun to do. I wanted to add those little white specks in the background. You could say it's snow falling or whatever, but I just think it adds some interest to these kind of simple postage designs. Today I chose to do these little white specks using Altenew titanium white gouache. Now this can be done with white pigment ink. You just press it onto your work surface, add a little water and mix it up. You could do this with white acrylic paint. There are many different options, but this is the one that I found gives me really bright specks. So I'm taking the masks from earlier and putting them back onto the images. I could have left them in place after I did some of the inking, but since I was making multiples, I had to take them off each time. So I put the mask back on. They don't have to be lined up perfectly, just kind of laying on there, and then do the little specks on top. I didn't want these specks to land on my images. That's why I masked them off, because we're going to color over it, and I didn't want to color over the white paint. Now I'm doing this into a box to try to contain all of my white specks, but I will tell you this was a great opportunity for me to test different ways of doing specks, like tapping it with my finger or doing it off the edge of an acrylic block. Lots of experimentation was done here. So I did these specks on all of the postage, and I will say that navy piece of cardstock that I put in there is beautiful when I'm done, so I'm going to save that for later. So adding those white specks took me about 10 minutes. That is a step you could skip, but for me, I think it was worth it. Now check these out. You could leave these as is with those images white. I think it looks really striking, but I will add more to it because that's just how I roll. I don't know. So I'm using two different sentiment stamp sets today. On the left, we have the Simon Says stamp, All About You. In that stamp set, I'm using the For You image, and I'll use the coordinating die. On the right, I have the CZ Design Holiday Typewriter. This is an older set and I reach for it often. I'll use the large Joy and Happy Holidays along with the coordinating die. Now some of these smaller sentiments I will stamp on my postage just to add a little more interest. And to save time, I will do these things at the same time in my MISTI stamping tool. So I have my MISTI, and inside of it I've placed my waffle flower grip mat. That grip mat will help to hold my cardstock in place as I do stamping. On the top left, I have a piece of white cardstock where I will place the For You, Joy, and Happy Holidays. In the bottom corner, I have one of my postage stamps, and I'm taking one of those smaller sentiments from the CZ Design stamp set and lining it up along the bottom edge of that postage. Now I can stamp all of these with black ink at one time. When I'm batch creating, I try to die cut multiple things at once, and I try to stamp multiple things at once. It saves you time in the long run. So now I have stamped the sentiments up on the top left. I'm going to rotate that cardstock and stamp them again on the other side of that white cardstock. And I've put in a new postage stamp that I can stamp a little sentiment along the bottom of. Now I ended up making a lot more of the sentiments on the top than I needed, but I'm saving those because I do plan to go back and make more of these cards later on, so I'll have these sentiments ready to go. Now for the smaller postage, I'm stamping smaller words, joy and merry, so I'm just using an acrylic block for those. After stamping all of the sentiments, I did use the coordinating dies to cut them out. If you're looking for some time-saving hacks to stamp and die cut a bunch of images at once, I do have a couple videos that would be very helpful for you, and I'll link to those at the end of this video and in my description below. I used a few of those hacks to make these sentiments very quickly. All right, now it's time to color. I do think these would look really cool if you left them white, as is, but I wanted to add color today. I'm using Caron markers and Copic markers. I am not doing blending. I am doing basic coloring. I felt like the style of these postage images that I used really didn't require much, so I'm just coloring these solid, not using multiple colors in one area, just keeping it basic. I am coloring all of the images at once, as you see me doing here. That will also save me a lot of time. So Caron markers, I've been using more and more lately. I forgot that I had them, to be quite honest. They're great with water or standalone markers. I'm using them as standalone markers today. And I reached for my Copic markers just for some of the lighter colors that I needed and I didn't have in the Caron collection. So after I colored all of the images, I did cut little pieces of white craft foam to put behind these postage stamps. I wanted some dimension to these on my card. You could skip that if you wanted to. I love that added dimension. Normally, I would cut pieces of scrap cardstock or die cut additional postage die cuts to put behind it, but to save time today, I instead used small pieces of craft foam. I am using Spellbinder's craft foam. It comes in a lot of different great colors, but I'm sticking with white today. But you could use any craft foam. And I'm adding it with Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. I do put something heavy on this while it dries, so you can see I have some paperweights, but you could put your Misty on top of it and that would be weight enough. So notice that I've kind of clustered my postage stamps in groups of 4. The 4 postage stamps that I want to go on a card together. So one that's red, one that's blue, one that's green, one that's pool. So I've already got those little piles, which will help me when I go to create the cards. I don't have to fish around for what I want. The piles are already set up. Now let's get our card bases ready. I could have left these as plain white note cards, but you know me, I want to add some texture. So I am using 3D embossing folders. And this was an excellent opportunity to just grab a handful of 3D embossing folders and use a different one on each card. So I chose a bunch of different Simon Says Stamp 3D embossing folders, and I'll show you the different options that I chose. I have white cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm misting both sides with a bit of water, putting them in the embossing folder, and then running them through my die cut machine. Now, I keep white cardstock pre-cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So I have a lot of that on hand, which also saved me time as I did all of these cards. So I'm going to show you the different embossing folders that I used, and I have the names at the top of the screen so that you can check them out if you wanted to. I really just went through my stash and looked for any that would work well with holiday cards. Most of these are much older embossing folders, and I was excited to be able to use these folders once again. And I think they are beautiful when just used with white cardstock like I'm doing today. This Shimmering Starfall is definitely one of my favorites of all times. Now you will notice that these give great 3-dimensional detailed texture. That's because the Simon Says Stamp 3D embossing folders are excellent. They're nice and thick. I found with the Empress machine, I just do a clear cutting plate and then the folder, and that's all I run through, and it gives the right amount of pressure. You'll have to experiment with your die cut machine to see what's right, but these are super thick, thicker than most 3D embossing folders, so you'll have to play around. But once you figure it out, you can make a note of it and you'll know for the future. Look at the detail in that one. Look at those tiny little dots. It's gorgeous. Now I'm going to keep all of these folders out because I plan to make matching envelopes using the folders, so stay tuned for that. All right, next up I have cut pieces of Altenew double-sided adhesive sheet to be slightly smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I also have a bunch of top folding 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note cards. Those I also make in bulk and keep on hand, which is a huge time saver. You can see them stacked up over there on the left. Now I am using double-sided adhesive sheet to add our textured 3D embossing folder backgrounds onto my note cards. The reason I'm using the double-sided adhesive sheet is because there's so much texture on these backgrounds that I really want to make sure that it connects with the adhesive. You could also use liquid adhesive, but this is much faster. So I put the adhesive sheet onto the note card, peel off the release paper, put it in the corner of my scoreboard, or you could do the corner of your Misty stamping tool, and then take one of your backgrounds and put it right in the corner also and press it down. That is a way to save time in making sure that your background gets lined up right on top of the note card of the same size. All right, now I have all my postage done, all my sentiments done, and all my card bases. Let's put them together. I am using Gina K Connect to put these postage onto our texture backgrounds. The reason I'm using Gina K Connect is it is a very strong adhesive and it gives me wiggle room time. I can move these around on my background until I'm happy with the placement. Now for this first one, I've got to move things quite a bit to try to figure out what I'm happy with, but then once I have this one done, the other 9 I'll just do in a similar placement. So once you get one plan ready, the rest will fall into place. You can see over there in my Spellbinder's Craft Stacks tray, I love those containers, I have my stacks of 4 postage die cuts that go together. So this is all about batch creating and finding ways to do little shortcuts to save time. Remember, I did a lot of details here. I like to do the details even when I'm batch creating, but a lot of the different steps I did could be skipped to save time if you wanted to. And keep in mind, there are so many different ways you could arrange these postage together. You could even do one postage stamp right at the top center of your card with a simple sentiment underneath it, but I really like the look of this cluster. I just feel like there's a lot of possibilities with these dies. Okay, so I'm adding even more to this because that's just my jam, but I wanted some sparkle, so I have some Simon Says Stamp silver glitter cardstock. This stuff die cuts beautifully. And I have some older Simon Says Stamp snowflake dies. I am creating some silver snowflakes that I can tuck around my postage. So I'm kind of tucking it behind the postage, peeking out. And I'll do kind of a visual triangle of the 3 snowflakes around the postage. Now, a little trick you could do here is to take a snowflake and cut it in half, and then you would have half a snowflake to tuck behind one postage on one card and another half to tuck behind another postage on another card, and that will save you time. Now here I'm playing around with the positioning, but once I get it on this first card, I can repeat that for the other cards. So this is something you could skip. You could instead add maybe some sparkly confetti or gems, but I thought those snowflakes were a fun added touch. And one more thing for these cards, I grabbed some matching envelopes. These are from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm putting the flap of the envelope into the same 3D embossing folders I used earlier. Now I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. And with the Empress die cut machine, you can put them in sideways and run it through. It'll fit. However, if you have a smaller die cut machine, you'll just need to put the flap into the 3D embossing folder and wrap the rest of the envelope around the folder, run it through, and then flatten it when it gets out. So I used the same 3D embossing folder on the flap that I used on the background of my cards, so they match perfectly. And here is what we end up with. We have 10 cards where the background matches the envelope, and there's lots of detail here. I was able to create these cards in one kind of long afternoon, but you definitely could break it up into little crafty sessions if needed, and you can shorten the amount of time by skipping a few of the details that I added along the way. But I thought it was fun to use the masking to create those little postage stamps. I also think it'd be fun to create like one postage stamp and put it on a tag, and those would be great for gift tags. A lot of different things you can do with these. Now, I'm just showing you all of the different combinations here so you can see what the final result is. And as I mentioned, I was just having one of those mornings that just wasn't going well, and I was not in the best of moods. I started making these, and it just brought me a lot of joy. I encourage you, next time you're just feeling down, to grab some happy products, make some happy cards like I did here. These stamps were just so joyful, and it brought me a lot of joy. So I know a lot of people are struggling for different reasons, so I encourage you to try crafting. You know, crafting therapy can go a long way. And I got to point out, look at this graceful holly embossing folder. Look at the detail of that. I think that is fantastic. So I could do these same cards, but instead of these playful images, maybe use just snowflakes on them and make a more elegant feel. I love that you can change this design up and these ideas and the masking hacks and such to use with different products for different looks. Now, earlier I mentioned that I'm a big fan of postage style products on my cards. I've done many using different products from Gina K Designs, Waffle Flower, and more. I will link below in my YouTube description to some of those other videos if you like that kind of look and are looking for more ideas. So there we go. We have 10 holiday cards ready to go, and I kept the details in these even though I was batch creating. And I'm hoping that these masking hacks are helpful to you. If you are interested in the supplies or videos I talked about, I have them linked below in my YouTube description. But I do encourage you to click the visual supply list link at the top of the description, because then you can see thumbnails of all the products that I use and the videos I talk about. It's just easier to find things if you look at that. Also here, I've linked to a couple other videos. I thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you soon.